Today's tour is a tour of the Grande Pacific Railroad Central Division from Junction all the way across to the eastern side to Golden. This will mark the completion of the railroad across the Central Division. Let's proceed. Starting at the staging section of the railroad, which is on the bottom level of the railroad. First level, bottom, whichever may be the case. We have engine 3105 with a loaded coal train, which will be extra 3105 headed east, which will be coming out of staging and headed up towards Love Eagle Pass. This is a view of the end of the wall section with all three levels. This will be extensive scenery as far as trestles and waterfalls and bridges in this area. (3105) is now eastbound, and we'll pass through first Junction Yard. Again, to give you some relationship to the operation of the railroad and where we are, this is at about 24 inches off the floor. The second level is 40 inches off the floor, and the third level is 60 inches off the floor. We have not installed all of the lights for the bottom level due to the sheer number that are needed. So the inconsistent lighting is due to lack of light bulbs. This is the throat section of the junction yard, and in this area in the foreground will be a interchange with the narrow gauge division and some engine facilities. Crossover a removable section in front of the air conditioner. This, as you can see by the lines, there's 4 screws, and you cut the tracks and you can remove that section so that the air conditioner can be removed. We then pass alongside of Union Station. This handles all passenger service on the railroad, and we will operate trains, the California Zephyr trains, on the regular schedule with extras, particularly steam excursions. The train is now coming up through what will be the Golden Yard for staging and classification. And in model railroading situations, this is just a necessary evil. Then an eastbound train passes through the west yard on the way out. This area in this part of the railroad is designed to be handled by a yard operator, which will be located at this position right here at the throat, and this panel will pretty much control everything that he'll have to do through use of NCE mini panels and switch controls. The train then passes through the double crossovers, and now we have a distinct separation of the track the train is on is eastbound, the other track is westbound. As the train enters the Helix, 3105 is eastbound entering the Helix. If it was on the other track, it would be westbound. The other track that you see over here next to the wall going behind the Swift plant is a reverse loop that allows an operator to turn a train, turn an engine from the bottom level. Actually, the way the bottom level is set up, it is a double dog bone. Where we started from was a reverse loop. So you can do double, and that would be the track coming back for the reverse loop. Now, we're not going to get in here and watch this train make 9.5 turns, so the next time you see the train, it will be at Eagle Pass. And this is the 9.5 turn, 36 outside, 33 inside radius Helix. This Helix was originally built for a layout that started in 1999 in the first Grande Pacific Central Division, which has now been, since I moved, taken apart. Now we see the train on the last turn of the Helix, and at this point in time, due to the way the Helix operated on the old layout, the two tracks come together. This will be put back to where there'll be two double tracks, but right now east and west again run on the same track. We're going to have to make a slight stop here for just a second. Walk over and push this button right here to align a switch. And then we will bring the train forward. At this point, here forward here, we're going to be coming out of a tunnel. And we're eastbound, so we're going to continue up over Rocky Loop. The list in front of you are switch 8s and the numbers on those switch 8s that we've assigned for switches. Most of the switches on this layout are controlled through the NCE system through a tortoise, and eventually will be on a computer screen for a dispatcher, and or can be controlled at local levels by the operators for switching purposes. The train is now on the main line and is crawling up the Rocky Loop. No in deference to any other type loops. The other one is actually reverses this. But at this point, we're climbing up past another coal train that's parked in the siding. And we're going to reach a total of 70 inches off the floor. Now this was a particularly interesting number because I'm 5'11", and we weren't going to have any more duck hunters. So the next feature on the railroad after we climb up Rocky Loop here is the Door River Bridge. This is the Door River Bridge. The train is going to continue on down the new track. The track off to the right from the siding leads through the old Love Pass, which now only exists so that we can service the cattle industry, which has some pins and stuff where we have to stop and pick up cattle cars. This will be an interchange here, just as it's pictured somewhat on the blocks. This will be a double track trestle bridge that the train is going over, and there'll be tracks and a road underneath that will cross over, which will be in the foreground, the end of the Rawlings branch, which will go through a tunnel up underneath. Haven't decided whether I put a loop in underneath or just have it dead end with a runaround track. But this will be all the Rawlings branch in the foregrounds. Some of the industries we plan on putting in. Train now will be passing through a tunnel. Tunnel will carry all the way down over the Rawlings branch. And the front loader is located on the Rawlings branch. And the train continues now, after passing the Rawlings branch cutoff, to head up over towards Rawlings Pass. Sorry about the big piece of foam core board in the background, but we mount some of the pictures we take on there to create things like the Union Station. You'll notice the cutout. That's a picture of the Walters building taken to Sam's and printed and then mounted up. Put it in run 8 here. We're now coming up on a section of the railroad that I finished for some of the locals who did not quite understand it. You will see the painted scenery, the mountains, and the styrofoam as the engine goes into the tunnel of Rawlings Pass, which is 6.3 miles long and was built in 1927. Oh well, I think you all know that story. Now here the train goes through Rawlings Pass. Just as a sidelight, we'll come down Rawlings Pass. I'll try to come back to this with the train later. And this was the section, and this is the Eagle River with the people fishing out of the boats, and the gentleman on the bridge watching the people fishing. And we come up to the town of Grizzly. We do maintain water facilities for our steam excursion trips, which usually come over this. We will have signals on the railroad. Exactly how we're going to function that still depends on when some things that are in development at this time. But we will put the signals up and have the connections. This is part of Grizzly, and then we come down here on the lower level to where the Fuelish production company has a couple of tank cars which they collect their crude in, and it's transferred back to the refinery. And then Dave's coal operation and the runaround track, which is a 40-2 and a 35 sitting in with a couple of cabooses and some more tank cars. At the top up here on the Rawlings branch, we'll have a lumber operation, and then we will also get into around the other side and a passing siding on the end. The large grain elevators with a small yard for the grain elevators. This was the drawings for the original layout. We stuck fairly close to it. Many minor modifications, but the only big change was made. Instead of the wall being 30 feet long, and we cut it back to 28, and that turned out to be a very smart decision. By the way, that is the one NCE radio transmitter receiver in the system. This is a 20 by 50 room. About 80% of it is the railroad. The other portion belongs to the office workroom, crew quarter, whatever you want to call it. And here comes the 3501 engine out of the other side of the Rawlings tunnel on the Rawlings pass line. The White Cliffs of Dover exist, and then we're going to have some oil storage tanks up here. And over here we're going to have a refinery. Nice picture of a refinery and worked into the mountains in this background. That'll work fine for us for a refinery. Some of the cars and trucks belong down by the station, and we were doing some moving. More bridges, more trestles. This is the Arkansas River. And at this point, we're coming up on West Tolan. Excuse me, West Summit. I'm sorry, West Summit. This will be a town in which we have some switching activity along the back wall. And all switching up here will be remotely controlled, and we use magnets to cut down on people having to stand up and reach over in difficult positions to think. In the foreground is a 3-track yard and the branch line, and in this area it's called Tolan, that services the Rawlings branch. Two trains will leave their drop-offs and pickups here in this area for the Rawlings branch. And of course, along the back wall, we'll have more industries. These buildings were put together by Jim Laughlin for me, most of them. Some of them I built, but they've kind of just taken a home here until we get them placed around the railroad. Now the train is headed back into the Helix. Sorry we didn't push the switch fast enough, and that is a old type switch. Sorry about the camera. We're headed back into the Helix, and we will throw the switch here for the west side or for the outside of the Helix. We're still eastbound, but we need to be on the east outside of the Helix now, going down when you're eastbound. And we will not sit here and watch the train go up and down the Helix. By the way, for those people who have to sit here and watch it once it's closed in, they will be able to monitor it on a TV screen. You can monitor your train's progress as it goes. As the train comes around going down the Helix, and I have speeded it up, you will notice that the engines are directly underneath the caboose. I will tell you that a 36-inch radius Helix, and it is on the outside tracks, once around is 18.5 feet. So I'm going to tell you, this train is about one car too long to fit in some of my sidings. I've made the sidings 18 feet, and it's a gauge to tell you whether where your train's siding. I have some sidings that will not fit in. Now, there are two switches inside the Helix on the outside to let you come off. These two switches will be removed. This will become a permanent setup on this railroad as to where you go on this Helix. You will not be given the option of taking the shortcut and come off the thing. The other thing about the Helix, and this is thank you to Walter Rieger, The train just passed over the gap joints, which are located right there. And the Helix is, from top to bottom, a reverse loop. Completely. So whenever trains enter or leave, doesn't make any difference what direction, how they're going. That doesn't present a problem, because if it's in a reverse position, the Tony's train exchanger, which is mounted on a member right back in the back there, will take care of it. We're now entering an area of the railroad. This in the foreground is called West Apex. As you can see, this will be an area for heavy switching, local industries, and it's designed to keep the operator at the apex quite busy. This and several other parts of this area will be designed to do that. We're missing some of the industries that are going to go in here, and some of this may not be as it finally turns out. As you come into apex, you've got a main line which the train is on, a passive siding to the right, and then the station track to the left, which also facilitates a runaround track for the local switcher. This is a house track here, and then we have the station track behind the depot. All depots will have 3 of this nature, or combination depots. And this one, and the reason we picked the name Apex, is in honor of Mr. Gil Freitag, who's suffered some medical conditions recently, which, in respect to his great railroad, the Stony Creek and Western, this is an appropriately named town. Where the 2 AC6000s are sitting is actually the switch lead for a small yard, which will exist. And the track behind it will be the lead to a second branch line, which has not been named yet. And we're now headed into East Apex. East Apex, again, will have the switching yard, and then we will come off down here at the end, and there will be several more industries in this area that the Apex operator will have to handle. Also, with this switching yard here, they will have to handle the cars coming in off the branch line, which will be accumulated at Apex and Silverville yards. For all other purposes, we'll just call this Telephone Curve. Haven't come up with a name for this area yet, so we will, for intents and purposes, could be East Apex. The train will then come up and pass over Jorn Creek. I don't know, somebody said that we got to do something of that nature. The painted scenery in the background came off of the modular railroad, and it does not depict this railroad, but it's an example of what you can do for background scenery. That was painted by a friend of mine. That was the first piece we painted, Eddie Thibodeau. He's not with us anymore, but it's an example of what you can do. And one other thing before we go on here, and I'll slow the train down. This is an example of Eddie's paintings. He got me started painting my own backdrops, and believe me, that was one he did on my old layout. I was able to salvage that portion of it, and I plan on trying to work it in a corner or something to where it's part of the layout as a tribute to Eddie and get me started. But that was the first piece that I had ever painted right there for a background scene on our modular layout, which currently is in a warehouse in Baton Rouge. Gravel company. The area up above here, which will be part of the branch line, is going to be all industries. You know, we're going to have the gravel company, probably have Champion Meat Packing, and of course this is all the buildings for the ethanol plant. We'll run along back here. which will require a lot of grain cars and a lot of liquid tank cars and a few box cars for various and sundry things. And this will go down, and there will be a tunnel track goes around to the next town and do it. As a sidelight to break up things a little bit and get rid of some of the straight lines, which are always a problem with railroad. We're passing the local Rio Grande passenger service, and it stopped at No Name City. Gee, look, No Name City. Oh well, I guess it's another case of something from somewhere else. No Name City, by the way, did not have a railroad in real life, or in the movies. Which one was it? So now the train comes down through No Name City. It's at the east switch at No Name City, and we're going on from here. Again, we come out, and this will be the big featured item on the layout as far as scenery, with the trestles and so forth. Eddie built these trestles down there, by the way. I think they're a little short for this application, but we managed to pick up on some stuff. Maybe we can extend them. Go into a tunnel. You will not be able to see anything behind where the Grande Pacific sign is. That will all be a mountain face. Now we're coming into the town of Silverville, and we've just passed the lead for the Silverville yard. There will be a small engine facility with sanding, diesel fuel, 2-engine rest, dollhouse in this area. In the background, all along here, even where the car boxes are, will be industries. Here's Gusto Distributing Company, and some of the many other ones, which again, all need to be worked out. And this will be the Silverville yard. Have the two ladders in at each end, and it's just a question of how wide we make the actual yard area. Some building flats and so forth. Come back down out of Silverville, which has a fairly good lengthy siding in it, which actually will hold this whole train. Which means that siding's more than 18 feet. The line on the plywood is the lead for the east end of Silverville yard. This will be industrial area also. And that's the East Silverville yard switch. As we come along to the next area in the railroad, this will be the lead in for. We've had a couple of scenes where there was flood loaders and so forth. We have in this area of the country a lot of coal mines. This will be the big coal facility on the layout, at least one of them. And we just haven't put the switches in. Actually, the switch we just passed over is only there temporarily because I don't have a left-hand switch, need a right-hand. That's in the wrong way. But we'll take care of that this week. This will be a number of tracks, interchange, loads, empties, switches to figure out how we're going to do it, and of course the New River Mine sitting back here. And there will also be something else here of a large nature. Handles a lot of cars because there's a lot of area in here to do something with. From there at the top, when you see the mountain, on that edge straight down will be a mountain wall. You will not be able to see that hole. You will not see anything back there. In fact, the train is approaching right about there is where it goes into a tunnel. And as it goes up through the tunnel, it's basically going into another world. We're trying to separate places on the railroad. So, and again, this gives us a nice lengthy siding coming in here that will be available to put in trains. We try to run some pretty lengthy trains, particularly when we're doing the coal or grain operation. Now we're at the west switch of Rock Ridge. Gee, what an appropriate name. And we're going to have a cement plant, and Rock Ridge has got the Coors Brewery. Call me if you're interested in these background buildings. A guy by the name of Dustin Trahan is doing them. He'll do whatever you want. And we must like beer distributors because we kind of have a myriad of some old employers on here. Here's Neil W. Coy Incorporated, which I spent 13 years working at. It's another beer distributor. Notice how he has gotten a forklift in the door and the beer barrel stacked up outside on the loading dock. Silver fish already. We'll have to fix that. But good work. Great background building. This is the town of Rock Ridge, and it'll have a station just like Apex, just like Silverville. And we're kind of fudging through here on some temporary trackage due to a lack of, the maintenance company didn't have all the switches, and but the railroad, you know, it must go forward. And at this point the railroad climbs up and it goes through another pass. And for right now, I guess this will be No Name Pass, because we don't have a name for it. Or No Name Tunnel. Could be like the railroad and just give it a number. So, or for practical purposes, we're going through the wall back to the other side of the room. Now, as we come back into the other side of the room, we come into back over another single truss bridge, just like that one right there, which will be over another in front of the bridge for the branch line, which is in front of the bridge for the main line going east. Oh, we're still going east. Guess I'm going to have to put a lot of signs, and here we go at Telephone Curve again. Put a couple more lights in there. This is Idaho Springs, West Switch, and the Idaho Springs siding. Train is now coming up on a tunnel, and we go into a tunnel. Reason, thought behind the tunnel here is there's no trains visible directly behind the station. Try to separate the two worlds as best we can. And again, these will be buildings for Apex. And we come through here, the Idaho Springs area, and this is the east switch. And at this point, we go into another tunnel. We just crossed into a reversing block into the Helix, And the train is headed towards Golden. A little bit more scenery from the old layout, which I was able to salvage. Some good examples in that picture, and then there's some bad examples of painting. But we did improve. It's foreground, and the attempt at the mountain in the foreground, and then what you see in the background was all the difference in the world. But believe me, you can do this. It's not difficult. Backgrounds like this look a lot better than just having blank walls. Little history here. The Swift company retired its last wooden reefer several years ago, and it was brought to this plant. It's put on display in front of the plant. The two metal side reefers, ice reefers in the front there, are also getting ready to be retired, and we're contracting with a new service now through an outside person to provide the new sophisticated reefers, and actually all will be retired. Where the scenery ends will be a actual sky, or in this case probably all mountain type scenery, flat board with tunnel entrances where the trains will pass in the tunnels, and you won't be able to see any of the Helix from this point. The old Waterford Street freight station. The idea from MR Magazine. Most of what you see in that picture are actual photographs or scanned copies of the actual containers you see in front of them. But that's nothing more than printed, scanned copies of the containers stuck on the wall. So that's the container wall. And here comes our train, 3105, which is now completed, crossing the Central Division over the Grande Pacific Railroad, and it is arriving at Golden for continuation and picking up another crew to go further east. Or in other words, we're going to turn it around, stick it back in the hole for the next guy to run at the next operating session as the next coal train. Gee, Lou, coal trains. They do it out in Colorado too. The scenery in the background will change. It actually is going to come further to the front. I didn't go back. You're coming out 30 inches from the wall, and you can't reach back there, and plus I had to have places to put the braces, so I only go back 24 inches for track. And this will give you kind of an overall view of it with the bracing. Same bracing exists underneath. You can stand on this. I have to say that I have seen a tremendous amount of overkill in railroad construction. This is all 1x4s, 1x3s, and 1x2s, and I literally stood on this section to remodel an upper section. The top section, most of it is 18 inches. There are no supports. There's two 3.5-inch screws every 16 inches with a metal washer on the top screw, which holds all of the top section up against the wall. This layout is, if you haven't noticed, powered by NCE DCC. We use mini panels to run switches. This is a mini panel right here. That is a little computer that works on the bus line. And basically it's a equivalent of a big diode that you can program to run those little buttons. So if you want to push a button, it'll throw 3 or 4 switches in whichever way you have the button programmed. This was written up in MR magazine in the last issue, which is in, I'm going to have to say, July 2010, I'm going to guess. Those are switch its. They control each one of those controls 2 machines, so that's 4 machines being controlled. There are the tortoise switch machines. I will say we did get better on our wiring techniques. This was some of the earlier installation. And you see the train here making the proverbial reverse. That's actually a reverse loop. This railroad in this building was built for the railroad. And here you see the train coming back through the wall on the reverse loop. We finished and ballasted the track here in the yards, all except for the front track, because I am going to pull this track out, and this is going to become dual gauge for a narrow gauge, more or less shadow box operation on the other side of the wall. Now, there is no third level on this side at this time, and this is the area coming off of the Helix, coming off the reverse loop in the center section, where I plan on running down this area here and putting in a 1 foot deep shadow box for the narrow gauge K20. I don't think anybody can model that part of the world and not have some narrow gauge. Oh, that was the only thing I missed. I would have installed a 2.5 inch PVC pipe underneath this second level all the way around for an in-house vacuum system. If I would have thought, oh, by the way, I worked for Philip Morris for 21 years. Some of the leftover remnants. A little bit different view from standing up off the floor, get a little height on this issue, and you get a better view of what the area at East Summit, Dolan and West Summit look like. The grain train is sitting on the siding. There's a work track also behind that, for the industries. Some of the ice reavers are sitting on the head end cars we pull around with the cab forwards, and some of the older diesel units. For the fun runs, now will not be used in the operations center, but we keep cars and trains around people to operate, because they like to come in and just run trains. So, a little bit better view of what the overall picture looks like. Now, also you'll notice on the ceiling, this whole thing is designed for dimming purposes. Lighting effects can be very, very important. We can take this to an entirely different world on lighting. By making some adjustments. I'm going to try to keep this running as I put this into effect. So we can dim everything. Now the ceiling lights, we don't have all the fixtures. Most of these fixtures I have in here were left over from the previous layout, and I am missing a lot of lights. So we can go all the way to night if you want to do that, and you get an interesting effect in here. by changing lighting. Now the bottom does not have dimming. It's strictly going to be done with the fluorescence, compact fluorescence, and it's an on-off situation. So we can have night in one part of the world and daylight in another part of the world. And we can even get this daylight a little bit brighter or a little bit darker. And the camera went over the night vision. See, there you go. Even us see in the dark. So it's just an example of things you can plan out and look into volt. When you're dealing with the 110 volt stuff, if you don't understand it, don't get into it. Make sure that, remember this, that if you're in a residence, you can pretty much do it any way you want to do it as far as it's to code with Romex cable. But for club members, if someone sees this, it's in a commercial building with a club, you're talking about an entirely different ball of wax when you start dealing with 110 volts. Most of the time you have to be in shielded coaxial cable. So just if someone gets a hold of this video and sees this, if you're in a commercial building, kind of think about what you're doing before you leave, because it could get expensive. Anyway, that's the lighting in the building. The other thing about lighting is I am 65 years old. Most of the people I know in this hobby are up in age. The older you get, the more lights you need. So if you're going to do anything, or if you got anything, and if you want to make one improvement to an existing layout, is improve the lighting. Because frankly, people, I can't see anywhere near as good as I used to. So, and I think it's true of almost all of us. So, I hope you have enjoyed this little video tour of the Grande Pacific Central Division. We're located in Houma, Louisiana. You can reach me at 504-723-9290. Or you can visit the website at www.grandepacificmodelrr.org. That is www.grandepacificmodelrr.org. And we try to update it periodically, which is going to come probably this weekend. Hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you.